Good evening. My name is Valerie Cordero, and I am the Co-Executive Director at Families for Depression Awareness. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar, Coping with Stress and Depression, How You Can Fit Mindfulness into Your Busy Schedule. Toward the end of the program, we'll have time for question and answer. We'll be pulling questions both from registration forms and from those asked during the live webinar. If you'd like to submit a question, use the question panel on your screen. You can get a handout of the slides by downloading the PDF at the top of this screen. We hope you will fill out the online evaluation after the webinar because your feedback helps us improve our program. As thanks, we'll send you a Coping with Stress brochure at no cost. Please also explore our website where you can find a downloadable Coping with Stress fact sheet, tips for supporting a person with depression, and information about how you can get involved with FFDA. And that website is www.familyaware.org. If you find that this webinar is helpful to you, please forward the link to your friends and colleagues. The recorded webinar will be available for viewing through our website for a limited time. Finally, we hope you will help us reach more families by making a tax-deductible contribution to Families for Depression Awareness today. Thank you for your attention, and let's begin the webinar. As you can see, we have a pretty full agenda for this evening. We are going to cover how to identify signs of stress, ways of managing stress, and particularly Dr. Goldstein is going to take us through some mindfulness exercises. We are going to discuss how to identify when what you're going through is more than stress, how to differentiate stress from anxiety and depression, and how and where to get help. We will conclude by talking about Families for Depression Awareness and the resources we offer, and then we will have time for your questions. So please go ahead and submit questions at any time. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker for the evening, Dr. Elisha Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein is co-founder of the Center for Mindful Living in West Los Angeles and creator of the 6-month online mentorship program, A Course in Mindful Living. He is a psychologist, speaker, and author who has published numerous articles, chapters, and blogs, including Uncovering Happiness, Overcoming Depression with Mindfulness and Self-Compassion, The Now Effect, How This Moment Can Change the Rest of Your Life, and co-author of a Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Workbook, forward by John Kabat-Zinn and MBSR Every Day. If you enjoy his speaking this evening, please check him out on his website, ElishaGoldstein.com, and you'll also see information about an upcoming weekend retreat in the beginning of December at Kripalu in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. With that, we'll give the floor over to you, Dr. Goldstein.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. And, I have to say it's really wonderful to have an organization like Families for Depression Awareness out there, because as we'll see in this next hour, how stress and anxiety and depression have a major impact just on our lives individually, but also our culture and our country and the world. And so, to have advocates out there and people creating more awareness is really important. So most of all, thank you all for attending today. And, it might sound strange, but I might even just have you consider kind of just thanking yourself for taking the time out of your daily busyness, maybe what your mind said you would, could, and should be doing, just to do something for your own learning, health, and well-being. And so, that's oftentimes the hardest person to thank. And when it comes to depression and anxiety, it really is the last person that we think of to thank. And so sometimes we need to learn how to shift and widen our perspective around that. So, okay, so let's begin. So we're going to begin by really talking about what's at the foundation of depression and anxiety in general, which is really stress. Stress is at the foundation of depression. It's at the foundation of anxiety. It's at the foundation of cellular inflammation in our bodies. It's at the basis behind many diseases we experience in our lives. While we might have genetic predispositions to things, stress can often cause environmental stress, or the way we are reacting to things can often cause the genetic expression for cellular inflammation in our body, which is also associated with depression and anxiety. And so we'll start with stress because that's at the foundation of it all. So, stress is your way of your body responding to environmental cues, social cues, cues within your body. Your brain is constantly monitoring the outside world and your inside world, and it's looking for danger because you're wired to survive. And so, there's a couple different ways to look at stress. There's positive stress and negative stress. And if you were to see a graph here, I could show you that stress is actually good for a short period of time. It creates motivation, creates courage. It allows us to do some incredible things, but then very quickly stress gets out of control and it becomes has serious depleting returns. So, but let's just kind of give you a sample of this, and we'll use an example of that's going to involve something that many of us love, which is dogs. In this example. So, I'm going to just run you through a certain scenario so you can just kind of experience something for yourself. Meaning, like that. Sometimes they say just an ounce of experience is worth more than a ton of information, and so I want you to just kind of soften your body for a minute. This isn't going to be a meditation or anything, but go ahead and soften your body and start off by just taking a deep breath. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes because I'm going to bring you through a visualization. And if you don't want to close your eyes, that's okay. If you find yourself multitasking right now, allow yourself permission to just pay attention to one thing at a time. So imagine that you're driving a car, and as you're driving, the radio is on, and you're enjoying the radio, and you come out of a curve, and you see a dog sitting on the side of the road. And your eye catches that, and very quickly the dog jumps in front of your car, and you slam on your brakes to swerve your car. But just notice what you're feeling, what you're thinking right now. What's happening in your body, being aware if there's any senses that are heightened or any tension or holding or bracing in your body that's there. And then also noticing that you didn't in that moment hit the dog. And you take a deep breath. And on that out breath, you just kind of release any tension in your body, release any worries in your mind. The dog is safe, you're safe, everyone's okay. So just noticing that experience, you can open your eyes again now, but just noticing that experience, if you can, and being aware of how your body feels when you feel stress. So that was acute stress. That was like stress that happened just in a moment of time. And we can experience this every day. In fact, just the other day I was driving and I was talking to a friend because now that can just come out through the car. And we were talking about, and I live in Los Angeles, and so there's a ton of traffic out here. And he was saying, like driving on the road is like a life or death scenario sometimes. And just as he was saying that, some woman didn't see me in her blind spot, was curving over to me, and I had to honk my horn. And it was just the most synchronistic moment, meaning like it was like a meaningful coincidence, that happened. But, so we can notice that, acute stress creates that fight, flight, freeze response in our body. It's meant to help us survive. It's meant to help us get out of the way. But when we're feeling that over and over and over again, it creates some serious issues. So, for example, some signs of stress, you might have experienced that during this particular exercise. You might notice tension in your body. You might notice pulsing in your heart. You might notice sweating in your body. You might notice that it's tough to concentrate. You're feeling overwhelmed. This can then lead to GI issues, gastrointestinal issues, inflammation in different parts of the body, blurred vision. We can kind of go on and on. I mean, stress is at the basis for it all. And so, your immune system will be taxed, so you might find yourself be more susceptible to illness. So, stress can go a long way. So, again, there's a reason for stress, and you see this slide here. I know it takes a few seconds from the time that I actually click it to the time you see it. It's just the speed of the internet is still pretty incredible. So, stress impacts the body with three things. This says fight or flight response, but it's really a fight, flight, or freeze response. Back in the Serengeti years ago, when a tiger or a leopard, or whatever's on this particular slide, was chasing a gazelle, and, immediately the gazelle, upon seeing the leopard, had to get the muscles engaged to begin running. So all the blood flow goes to the muscles, the tension comes to the body, and we don't need certain things anymore. We don't need reproduction in that moment. We don't need to really take the time to kind of reflect and think, so we don't really need perspective in that moment. All we need to do is get the heck out of there. And so we don't need to digest anything. So all these different areas of the body kind of shut down so we can get out of there. So, but imagine this happening repeatedly over the day because our mind is more attacking us, worrying, catastrophizing, or being self-critical, or being hopeless about the future. All of these mental states begin attacking our body and creating more stress. And we have a certain level of stress that, is not natural for our bodies to have. But, I mean, the good news is, and we'll get to this, there's ways to begin to relate to all of this differently. So you feel a greater sense of confidence, or you or whoever your loved ones can feel a greater sense of confidence and control, and even use difficult situations to create strengths that allow them to feel a greater sense of sustainable wellness over time. So you can see, so this is on this slide is something that I had just mentioned a moment ago, which is, how chronic stress over time can create all of these types of different issues. In fact, we might even say that what's so interesting is, Valerie mentioned before that I wrote this book called Uncovering Happiness. And the foundation of that book was really my interest in how, and saying that if we looked at the brain on depression, let's say, what do we notice, and what can we learn about different ways to different things we might be able to do to shift neural activity or to even strengthen certain parts of the brain that have been impacted with depression. And so what was interesting is when I looked at that, there were three parts of the brain that were impacted. One was this area that's right behind your forehead called the prefrontal cortex. When someone's depressed, shows a lot of activity in the right area of the right side of the brain, which is involved with avoiding things in life and also with negative thinking. The other part was this area, the central area, more called the emotional center, this amygdala, that's more involved with like the fight, flight, freeze response, and more involved has also been called the fear circuit. Basically is like monitoring your environment to tell you, are you safe right now? And then this other part, and so you see that as inflamed or enlarged in a brain on depression. And then this other part right behind there called the hippocampus, which is involved with learning, memory, and putting things in context. The reason I'm telling you this, those three parts of the brain, is that when you look at someone with chronic stress over time, you see the exact same neurological map that you do with someone with recurrent depression. So in other words, recurrent depression or someone with, as well as with post-traumatic stress disorder, so long-term chronic stress, you see the neurology around why depression is actually a trauma. So when we say increased vulnerability to all these different things, what we're saying is like that depression is chronic stress over time. That's a big part of it. So you might consider this for yourself too. So when you think of depression, when you think of stress, let's say, chronic stress, when you're stressed in time, how do you cope with stress? So this is an opportunity just for you to kind of reflect on this for a second. Do you cope with it in healthy ways? Do you cope with it in unhealthy ways? I know that sometimes when I'm stressed, I sometimes can become mindless about it, and I'll just kind of like grab a bunch of stuff and just start kind of eating it. Lucky for me, I like enjoy nuts, and so I'll just kind of like start eating nuts. But I know some of it will be kind of stress eating, anxiety, stress, stuff like that. But you might consider, like, are there things you do? Do you blame people? Do you shout at people? So it makes it relational. That's something that can be a negative reaction to stress, irritability, and then we do something about it, or we don't sleep well, or we sleep too much, or we don't eat well, or we don't eat enough, or we eat too much, or maybe I go spend a bunch of money. Now that I can do one click on Amazon, I just there it is. I'm just gonna like buy stuff all over the place. How do you cope with stress? Some people, I'll have a slide like this, and they'll say, well, I go exercise. I go talk about it with someone. I call a friend. I'm like, okay, so I do yoga, I meditate. Okay, so these are potentially ways that I'm looking to balance my nervous system in healthy ways. So there's no judgment on this right now. In other words, if you're looking at this and you're saying like, well, geez, God, I have all these unhealthy ways of coping with stress, especially if you've had depression in your past, your mind's likely to judge you right now. I'm wanting you to look at this more with a sense of curiosity. To just be curious about, how does my mind automatically react to stress? Does it pull me towards these unhealthy behaviors? And then what we're going to notice in a moment, in a little bit, is how do we interrupt that to be able to have a more adaptive response? So this is kind of what we'll go into. So there's more positive strategies to coping with stress, and so I'm going to spend a little time on this slide just so you can reflect on this for yourself, because again, this presentation right now would be worthless unless there was some experiential component to it. I'm worthless in the idea of worth less than worth more. It's worth a whole lot more if we do this right now, and as I'm doing this, you're kind of like actively reflecting on how does this relate to me in my life? Because then what's going to happen is your brain's going to remember it more and be able to integrate it in your life in a more effective way. So consider for a second. So here's the strategy. So we can deliberately relax. So I know that I've been teaching mindfulness and meditation classes for over 15 years, and been a clinical psychologist for about that time as well. And what I found is that a lot of programs don't teach you how to actively relax, and to be able to kind of stabilize your nervous system is important. So consider ways in your life that help you relax, like healthy ways. Does stretching help you relax? Does deep breathing help you relax? Does going on a walk help you relax? Maybe turning on a favorite television show helps you relax. Maybe playing board games helps you relax. What helps you relax? So relaxing deliberately is in a healthy way, is a good way of working with stress. We now know more than ever that the diet we eat, the food we eat, has a major impact on our mood and the inflammation in our bodies. So it's good to kind of take a moment and consider, if I've had depression in my life, then that means that I likely have cellular inflammation in my body. It's a possibility. They're correlated. So it would probably be a good idea for me to consider what are anti-inflammatory type of foods that I want to eat. And just kind of start researching that as a way of being curious. Not that you don't have to get super drastic about it, but just consider, refined sugars are inflammatory. certain types of meats are inflammatory, or processed foods are inflammatory. So are there things that are not inflammatory? Well, geez, like bone broth is really anti-inflammatory, and even kind of certain meats are anti-inflammatory. So, and people have different, obviously, different opinions on a lot of this stuff, but it's good to just be curious about the foods that you have. If you're smoking, obviously that's going to sometimes make it harder to breathe, and so that's going to maybe increase, even though it gives you a decrease of anxiety initially, it might over time increase your stress. Coffee and alcohol are okay in moderation, and but it's good to kind of evaluate. Like, am I drinking too much coffee? What impact is that having on my nervous system? If stress is at the basis of this, and over time a bunch of coffee is making me stressed out, then, or alcohol is a way of me kind of self-medicating, is that impacting my anxiety and depression over time? So all this stuff. Exercise, obviously, one of the at the beginning of all of this is, if you're moving your body, that's getting the blood flow going through your body. It's really important when it comes to your stress. Whenever someone comes into my office and they've experienced depression or anxiety or high levels of stress, I ask about their exercise. It's just one of the most basic factors, and to be able to do it is to be able to drop your idea of what exercise means and just say, am I able to put my shoelaces on today, or am I able to put my walking shoes on today, and if I'm able to do that, can I walk for 5 minutes? Can I walk for 10 minutes? Depending on someone's level of depression or anxiety, what their history is, we can all find ways to begin moving our bodies, and it makes a major impact. Connection is at the basis for feeling well and happy. It's a natural antidepressant. And laughing and playing is also a natural antidepressant. Singing opens up if you think about depression as like heavy and contracting, and anxiety quite literally contracting your body. That's what happens. If you walk around with someone with depression, anxious, you'll see their head will be kind of low. Maybe their body will be kind of turned in sometimes. Singing is opening up your body, even no matter what your voice sounds like. We could all make lots of jokes around that. Believing in spirituality is helpful for a lot of people because it's something greater than yourself. Depression is this constant me, what's wrong with me? We become sick of ourselves because our mind can't stop thinking about me. And so spirituality is oftentimes a belief in something greater than yourself. And so that helps you get out of yourself. Also, there's oftentimes communities, in those areas. And so then we find connection. And this last one about focusing on your goals, I'm just going to say that it's very common when you do something that gives you a sense of accomplishment, that's a natural antidepressant. I don't care if it's cleaning the corner of your room or getting a couple bills paid or finally taking that huge trip you wanted to take, whatever it is. Giving yourself a sense of accomplishment is a natural antidepressant. So all of these are really positive ways of coping with stress. It's going to be different for everyone. So, there's no cookie cutter thing, no one size fits all type of deal. Unfortunately, in this human life, we need to experience a lot of things for ourselves to kind of be curious about what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Just because it worked for my neighbor doesn't mean it's going to work for me. Like the South Beach diet worked for my neighbor. I try on the South Beach diet, it didn't work for me. So that's because my body is different. My history is different. I grew up differently. I had a different childhood, so I have different cues and triggers and all kinds of things. So strategy for coping with stress with this person may be different for me. So I'm going to try this on, be curious, and just kind of see what I notice. One thing that we
Dr.
do
Goldstein,
know that's really, yeah.
Oh, sorry, this is Valerie interrupting really quickly. We had somebody submit a question before the webinar, and they wanted to know, is it realistic to try to avoid stress in your life altogether? Is that something that you can do? Can people not get stressed or intervene before stress even comes on? Or is it something that we all need to accept that's going to happen at some point in life and that we need to really invest in, as you were just explaining, finding one or more of these techniques to help cope with that when it comes?
Well, I'm going to assume the question is about negative stress, meaning before we talked about positive stress, there's like some stress is actually good, creates courage and motivation, and heightens our awareness, and stress is, a part of life. There's that common thing that says, if there's two certain things in life, it's death and taxes, and so that's for comedy. But really, if there's certain things in life besides death is afterlife, is stress and pain. Stress and pain are a part of life. That's just like it's completely unavoidable. But I will say this, that suffering is optional, and so this is what I mean by that. We can learn to relate to stress and pain in our lives in a way that turns the volume down on how much we suffer from the stress and pain. In other words, again, in Uncovering Happiness, I have this thing called the depression loop. It might as well be called the stress loop. It has thoughts, emotions, sensations, and behaviors, and it becomes a complex, and it becomes something that is an automatic loop. Only one thing needs to happen in order for the whole loop to fire up and to catch ourselves in a spiral downwards. And so a stressful event can happen. We can never control what happens in any particular moment. We don't know whether a car is going to turn into us, or we're going to receive that piece of mail and our brain's going to be like, oh no, and fire up this stress response. But what we can do is we can become more aware of the stress reaction we're having it, and learn to relate to it differently, so we nip it in the bud sooner, and we even begin building strengths from it. So I hope that becomes clear. There's a number of research studies, one being some of the early ones that come out of a program we'll talk about in a few moments called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which was a program that was created for people who have chronic pain. And what they found was at the end of the program, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later again, is that after 8 weeks, the people's sense of pain, it wasn't as if they didn't have pain anymore. It's just that they didn't, their perception of the pain was a lot lower. So in other words, on a scale of 1 to 10, their perception of the pain was 7 at the beginning of the program. Their perception of the pain was about a 4 or a 3 by the end of the program, because it no longer bothered them quite as much. It wasn't so sticky. It didn't hook them as much as it did before. And they even took burn victims and, put kind of heated rod next to them and asked them on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your level of pain? And they'd say 8 or 9. And then they had them do certain practices over the course of just 4 days that had them learn how to relate to their bodily experiences differently, so that the perception of the pain became more like a 4 or 5 or something like that. So again, we can only prepare and respond. We can never change what's happening. We can never control what's happening in the present moment, but we can learn how to prepare for stressful moments, and we can learn how to respond to them differently so they don't carry on as long, and then we're also not suffering as much from them. And I will say, again, just to reiterate this, which is important, not only are we not suffering as much from them, but we're actually growing stronger because of them. And that may sound strange, but we'll get into that in a minute. But that's entirely possible. And what more or less is that, on all the programs that I teach. So I will mention this. This is important. So when we're talking about mindset, one of them that doesn't happen as much when we're chronically stressed over time, again, maybe spending a lot of time in that right prefrontal area, which is about kind of negative emotions, where we experience negative emotions and avoidance, and we avoid things in life. The left side, I didn't mention this, the left side of the prefrontal area behind the forehead is involved with positive emotions and approaching things in life. And so we want to light up a wider scope, within our brain here. And one of the ways to do that is to practice gratitude. And this might sound kind of like hokey or whatever, that like, well, yeah, just kind of think about all these grateful things and that's going to save my life. But I'm just saying that let's kind of create some neural activity in that part of the brain. And one of the things is and there's a bunch of different ways to do this, which is, and by the way, doing gratitude practices has been shown to be inversely correlated with heightened stress and also with depression. And so we're playing with this. But the best way that I know how to do this is with a practice. So I'm going to guide us through a specific practice again right now. This will just be like, again, just like 2 minutes long, nothing long. It'll be an integration, a little bit of like mindfulness, which just means awareness with this kind of gratitude practice, which makes it a bit more embodied, which what we're going to do there is we're going to light up more parts of the brain in doing this practice, which will make it stickier for you or make it more memorable. So your brain has that filter when it's trying to perceive other present moment experiences in its life. So so one way you can do this is by just kind of laying down at night and practicing listing off like 5 things you're grateful for in your life. The more specific, the better. Or another one is to create a whole journal. There's a ton of these out there now, gratitude journals. You can just get a pad of paper, or you can buy someone's gratitude journal, and then you can just write a number of things in there. Or we're going to do this practice right now. So while we do this practice, first I want you to just kind of think of something that you are grateful for in your life, something that you feel fortunate to have in your life, whether it's a person in your life, or whether it's a conversation you have with someone, or something that recently happened to you, catching the smile of a baby. It could be anything large or small, but just kind of think about one thing maybe. Maybe if you're in LA or Houston, it's your your team getting to the World Series, end of the World Series. Okay. So hopefully you got something by now. And so now I'm going to invite you to close your eyes again. You don't have to, but you're welcome to. Start off by taking a deep breath. I want you to think about, reflect on what it is, what that thing is that you are actually grateful for in your life. And I want you to picture it in your mind, kind of like it's a movie in your mind. Who was there? Who's it about? Was there anything said? What was it? What is it about this that you feel grateful about? And allowing that to unfold like a movie in your mind. I'm going to give you just a few moments with this. Now, as you're reflecting on it, you're noticing how you're feeling in your body right now. If it feels tense or loose, feels warm or cold, whatever it might be. I'm saying that there's a sense of allowing this sense of gratitude, this is to kind of fill within your whole body. Keeping in mind whatever it is that you're grateful for. Breathing in, opening to whatever this is. Breathing in, opening to this appreciation. Breathing out, just letting be. Enjoying this just for a few moments. Okay, not too much of that. Not too much of that. Okay, so so you're just kind of noticing your experience. And again, you might have had an experience where you did notice an openness, a lightness that was there, a warmth, or you might have not, and that's okay. Again, not a one-size-fits-all type of thing, but we do know through research of thousands of people that practicing being aware of what's good in life, a sense of appreciation, actively has an inverse relationship to negative stress and also to depression. And so, just being aware of that. And again, my suggestion to you is just to kind of play with this in your daily life. You don't need to, think it's a panacea or anything, but just kind of play with it and just see what you notice. Again, it's that attitude of curiosity that's important. That's what kind of breaks through our kind of limited beliefs, I would say. Another thing that's helpful in working with stress, also with depression. Again, depression is just filled with, our anxiety is just filled with kind of negative kind of thinking. Again, lighting up that right prefrontal area, not as much activity in the left side. So we're trying to kind of shift activity in that direction. So one thing you can do is kind of turn negative thoughts into positive possibilities. So here's what, one thing that I like to do. It's an adaptation from this woman, Byron Katie's for question, which we have a negative belief about myself, which is I don't think I'm a terrible person, let's say, right? So that's a thought. So I ask myself, is it true? And I say, yeah, I'm a terrible person. Do I know that to be absolutely true? Can I be 100% certain that I'm a terrible person? All parts of my life, would everyone around me say I'm a terrible person? So it's like, is this thought a fact? So a fact is something that's generally agreed upon by most people. So if I can't be absolutely true, I might say, okay, well, it's not absolutely true, maybe. So then I might say, well, how does it make me feel, that thought I'm a terrible person? It makes me feel kind of lousy. I feel kind of down. It makes me depressed. And what does it make me want to do? I want to grab that bag of potato chips. I want to sit down and watch, TV for 12 hours, whatever it might be. I want to not talk to people anymore. I want to sleep more. What does it make me want to do? How does it make me feel? What does it make me want to do? So these are important questions because what we're doing now is we're objectifying that thought. We're getting a little bit further from it. And that's important because thoughts aren't facts, not even the ones that say they are. And so, and now I'm asking myself the question, what would be different if that thought wasn't there? And most people say, I feel lighter, I feel more open. So if thoughts aren't facts, but that thought's really kind of controlling me, I need to kind of begin to shift my relationship to it. And so I can continue to play with objectifying the thought by doing these sort of 4 questions. I might kind of shift it. If I'm going to talk about opening the possibilities, I might say I'm a wonderful person. Well, is that true? So these are my 4 questions now. No, it's not true. I'm not a wonderful person. Is it possible that it's true? Is there any possibility that I'm a wonderful person? I guess there's a possibility, as small as it might be. I guess it's possible. Well, if I step to that possibility, if I really kind of believe that for a moment, let's say I wholeheartedly kind of took that on, how would it make me feel and what would it make me want to do? I guess I'd feel lighter, I'd feel more open. I guess I'd be okay kind of talking to people. I'd be more engaged, all this stuff. And I linger in that experience just for a few moments because I just want to allow that embodiment to just carry on for a few moments. One thing we know about the brain is that neurons that fire together wire together, an old quote by this guy, Donald Hebb. And so I want to get those neurons firing in that direction a little bit more. And that's it. Then I can let go of it. It's perfectly fine. So another way of kind of doing this, of kind of getting into that left prefrontal area of the brain is by taking inventory of things that are positive about ourselves. Again, it's not like we're trying to tell ourselves we're not getting rid of the negative stuff. But we are, because our brain won't believe that, but we are trying to spend more time fleshing out what's good in some way. So we're finding what's good within each and every one of us. So you can say I'm a hard worker, I'm an excellent cook, I'm an excellent husband, I'm a good friend, I'm great at organizing, whatever it might be. Just making a list of positive attributes. I also like to, in addition to this, whenever someone says something good to me, I like to write that down somewhere, and I tell people to do that too, and keep a little folder of the good things that other people have said to you, whether it's in an email, whether it's in a chat, or whether it's something live that they've said to you. Write it down, keep it in a folder, and whenever you're feeling down, whip out that folder. And so that's just another little helpful tip that can be something that can help flesh out these kind of positive attributes that are there. I mean, this is a tough thing too. Where I don't know if you see the slide yet, but it's hard whenever we kind of have a to-do list, and this is so common. And we ask people, where are you on this to-do list? They say, I'm not even there. How are you taking care of yourself? Are you doing something for yourself in the morning before you wake up? After you wake up? Or are you just on to just taking care of everybody else, or just doing negative things for yourself? Like, how are you giving to yourself? So if you're a caregiver, one of the greatest things we see in caregivers is a real drive towards self-compassion, which is a recognition of my own suffering with the inclination to want to support myself. And there's like a thirst and a hunger for that. When I started teaching a lot of mindfulness-based programs, one of the programs out there is called Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy, which is, really for helping overcome, it's really for relapse prevention for depression. And after teaching the program, I started to tweak it and add in a number of self-compassion practices. What I found was that there was a huge thirst and longing for these practices, and people found these practices even more valuable than a lot of the other ones, because when it comes to depression, the research shows an inverse relationship, and you know this for yourself, whether you struggle with depression or you've seen other people in your family or community struggle with depression, inverse relationship between caring for yourself during times when you're having difficult moments and depression. In other words, when one is up, the other is down. When you're depressed, you don't care. You're not caring for yourself. Not being kind to yourself, typically. When you're being kind to yourself and caring for yourself over time, it's a natural antidepressant. A natural antidepressant. So how do you give to yourself is the question. And so we'll just kind of review this program, this 8-week MBSR program, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Wonderful program John Kabat-Zinn created years ago, 1979. It gained notoriety in 1991 when Bill Moyers put it on a special. It's been shown to have significant results with stress reduction over the course of 8 weeks, and other programs have come off of it, which is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and that's been shown to help with the relapse prevention for depression, as I mentioned earlier. I've integrated these programs as well as integration of the research and science around self-compassion and play, the importance of play as a natural antidepressant, and that's where the birth and the neuroscience of all of that and the practice of it, and that was the birth around uncovering happiness. But mindfulness-based stress reduction was a foundational program in all this, and so go to this kind of. I think I went back the slide. So mindfulness just really means awareness. Is really all it means. And we can become more aware of certain mind traps that lead us, certain ways of behaving that keep us stuck in our depressive loops. But as a practice, it's intentionally paying attention to the present moment, something that's here with a more of an engaged curiosity, sense of non-judgmental awareness, which is the opposite of when we're feeling depressed, which is more of a judgmental awareness or an unawareness that's there. And so you can see how there's like a bit of a, even the practice of it is going in the opposite direction of anxiety and depression. So within MBSR, you're practicing, you're doing 8 weeks of practicing certain meditation practices. You're integrating it with yoga. Some teachers, replace the yoga with Tai Chi or integrate it, with Qigong or these other types of kind of movement types of practices. They're body awareness movement practices. And then we also start noticing our thoughts and learning how to relate differently to our thoughts and our emotions. And, over time feel more freedom from that. One of the reasons I created this 6-month program called A Course in Mindful Living is because, that gives us more time to kind of build relationships with other people who are doing this type of thing. We feel really supported, at the same time and have ongoing mentorship with that. So, there's different ways to do this informally in your life. So there's the formal practices, which are the meditations themselves, like a body scan practice or a breathing practice. And there's the informal stuff where you can just bring this into your life in ways that don't take your time. You can wake up to sounds that soothe you. Sometimes I like to wake up in the morning, and before I drink my coffee, I drink a glass of water, sometimes a glass of water with lemon in it, sort of to hydrate myself before I dehydrate myself. Before I grab my phone, I go outside and look at the trees and allow my eyes to just rest on that. And again, I live in LA in a busy place. I have like bushes and some trees around me, so I'm allowing myself to kind of do that, a bit. I make sure to just kind of find small areas to kind of stretch my body and wake my body up. To try and be intentional in the conversations that I have with people all day. There's all kinds of ways I can do this with myself that I don't even need to take time out of my day to do. So we're going to do a very short practice I'm going to give you. You can do anywhere, anytime. You can even find a video recording it on my website, if you want to, into the video section, so you can kind of practice it over and over again if you want. This is called, it's a very foundational practice called the stop practice. Stop stands for, the S stands for stop, the T stands for take a breath. That's meant to interrupt the autopilot. The O stands for observe, being aware of my body, being aware of my emotions, being aware of how my mind is right now. And the P stands for proceed. Proceed, I often say proceed with asking yourself the question, what's most important to pay attention to right now, or what do I need? So we're going to do this. It's, again, about a 2-minute practice. These practices don't need to take a lot of time. They can if you want to. We can, you can introduce 10, 20, 30-minute practices in your life. Ultimately, that's not a bad thing to do, but you can also, you begin integrated short practices. So here's one. And your job here is just to be aware of your experience. That's it. So again, I'll invite you to close your eyes one last time, taking a deep breath, allowing yourself the gift of these 2 minutes. You have other things that you're responding to or playing with other things in your environment, just allowing yourself the gift of just these 2 minutes. So again, one more deep breath. Just stopping what we're doing right now. Just being aware of your body here. Noticing the positioning of your body. Also how your body's feeling. Being aware if there's any tension or holding anywhere. And noticing how with a bit of awareness you might allow that to soften or adjust your body. The choice to do that. Also being aware of in this moment how you're feeling emotionally. There's a sense of comfort or discomfort. It's okay either way. Your job is just to be aware. You can even name it if you want to. And also noticing if your mind seems busy and distracted, and if it does, that's perfectly fine. You're just noticing that busyness. Or if it seems like it's settling into being here. But then just proceeding now with asking yourself the question, how do I want to be in this next moment? Present. I want to be grabbing for other things. What am I needing right now? And just allowing that to flavor the next moments of your life. So what this practice does is it can interrupt what I call the depression loop. Again, the thoughts, emotions, sensations, and behaviors. You can notice that you're stuck in that. You take a moment, you stop, take a few deep breaths, observe. You pop out of autopilot, you steady your mind a little bit by just being here with the body, and you ground to become a little more present with this inquiry of how's my body feeling right now, softening the body if it's tense. And then you ask yourself the question, what am I needing? And do I need all this self-judgment? Do I need to eat this bag of potato chips? Do I need to be distracted by 1,000 things right now? I think I'm needing to lie down. I think I'm needing to put my hand on my belly right now. I think I'm needing this healthier option. You gain more blood flow to your prefrontal cortex in general, the part that has more emotion regulation and perspective, when you become more present. So other ways to release stress in the moment. So you had your own experience about that. And again, you can find that stop practice again on my website, elishagoldstein.com, under videos. Listen to it again and again if you want to. But other ways to release in the moment. You could go walk with a coworker, things you might already know. Stretching is just so powerful to stretch your body. It can just get you in your body. It turns the volume down, the busyness of your mind. Taking a few deep breaths. Take as many deep breaths as you need. You can even create reminders in your phone. Take a few deep breaths. Take as many as you need right now. Really, it makes a big difference because it brings oxygen into your body, and that creates more blood flow in your body. And so all these things. But then all this is not worth very much if we can't kind of make commitments to ourselves. So one of the things that's interesting is in the field of mindfulness, psychotherapy, or different areas, we often talk about intentions. Like, what's your intention? Make some intentions for this next week for yourself. But really, like what we shy away from is the word commitment. And committing to ourselves, making a promise to ourselves is really important. All with the playful mindset of learning, because we might fail, and that's okay. Well, then we look back and we say, what were the obstacles? What can I learn from those obstacles and then integrate into my next week? So you can say to yourself, I commit. So you can write something down right now. Like, let's just use this stop practice as an example. I commit to doing this stop practice 3 times a week this week to help manage my stress. Or use whatever you want to do. I commit to going on a bike ride by the end of the week. I commit to going to yoga class by the end of the week. I commit to going on a run. I commit to, whatever you want. But make one commitment right now, and bring it into your week. So here's where we get into, I know I've been kind of linking to this all along, but when we get overly stressed, that's when we our brain goes into survival mode and wants to keep us away from people, keep us away from things. We lose interest in things, so we start getting anxious and depressed. We know that there's a medical disposition to this. Like if the depression is in your family, there's a higher likeliness of you becoming maybe depressed. It doesn't mean you will, but there is more of a chance for that genetic expression to happen. You're just more likely, more susceptible, or vulnerable to it. That's all. So if your family has autoimmune issues, you're just more susceptible to that. That's all that means. Same idea. So it can be considered a medical condition. It can be considered a neurological thing that's going on in the way that I've looked at the brain. At the same time, it's a human experience. But we can work with it, and it's not always about medication. Sometimes that's helpful. It can be really helpful to medication can be helpful in order, sometimes depending on how depressed or anxious we are, in order to allow us to even do the work that we're talking about here. So there's no shame in that necessarily, but we can also find natural antidepressants, and these are the ones that I kind of talk about quite a bit. So anxiety is excessive dread or fear. You can have anxiety, that sense of fluttering in your heart or tension in your chest. Anxiety disorder is something that's prolonged over time. It's actually impacting your life in negative ways. You're having panic attacks. You're not leaving your house. You're having obsessive compulsive type of behaviors in your mind or actually in your activity in your life. It's where it's kind of like really impacting your life and your level of well-being. There's a common humanity to anxiety disorders. 40 million adults in the U.S., many more teens. Seems to be a bit on the rise, and I think that's why there's been this big proliferation around mindfulness. Is where it's like a natural surge to begin to balance out the increased anxiety we're experiencing in our country, not just because of what's happening in the country and the world, but also like the just complete overstimulation around our smartphones and information that our brain isn't used to managing and holding. And so, we're finding ways now to calm our minds, begin to understand our emotions more, relate to them differently so that we can begin to heal and feel stronger in the face of depression and anxiety and heightened stress. Signs of anxiety, these different signs. Excessive worry, not sleeping well, eating too much, eating too little. It's the same, it's the same type of anxiety. It's the same as with depression or with chronic stress. Very similar. In fact, sometimes anxiety and depression go together so often. They're not always, but very often. Clinical depression, a medical condition, it's really heavily impacting your life. It's persistent. It's over time. There's thoughts of hopelessness. I can't help myself. No one can help me. It's never going to get better. Constant self-criticism, self-loathing. 16 million Americans experience this. Probably many more than that. And 30% have suicidal thoughts. Or not suicidal thoughts, sorry, there's suicidal tendencies. Most have suicidal thoughts. But 15% of people with untreated depression die by suicide. So it's pretty serious. We talk about our war veterans who come back, and most of their suicides are from feeling trauma. And remember, PTSD and depression in the brain look the same. So they're feeling highly depressed. So you hear for at least 2 weeks, you feel all these different, feeling miserable, irritable, loss of interest and pleasure in things. And if there's any sign of suicidal tendencies, someone has a plan, they're thinking about suicide, and they kind of know how they're going to do it. They need to seek help immediately. Call the psychiatrist, call 911. Other signs of depression, again, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, eating low signs of self-worth, inability to concentrate, starting to stay away from work, stay away from school, constantly tired, exhausted, start to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, to kind of get through the day and survive. So other people are noticing, when people are in depression, they're like super negative. They're always kind of looking, always hopeless. There's a sense of meaninglessness, and it's interesting with this dot here, which is having trouble at work or at school. Yes and no. A lot of people function, and you won't be able to tell that they're having trouble at work and school when they're really depressed. So that's kind of the hard part sometimes. But withdrawing from people, certainly, eating or sleeping too much or too little. I mean, there was a time in my 20s, you can read my story in Uncovering Happiness, where I was completely separating myself from my family, my friends, not answering phone calls, all kinds of stuff. That was mixed with my own self-medication. So where to go for help? You can complete an online screening, familyaware.org, and then you can bring it to the therapist, and they can create their own screening from that. Your doctor, mental health clinician, employee assistance program, all these different places to go for support. I know there's a website called 7 Cups of Tea that will let you do written chat support with people. It's free. But these are all great ones on this slide too, as well. There's talk therapy, there's CBT, there's medication that can allow you to even do the cognitive behavioral therapy depending on the person's level of impairment. Obviously good sleep, eating well, getting good exercise are fundamentals. There's the acronym C, sleep, exercise, and eating. So take that to heart. Those are real fundamentals. If I can just kind of get myself to move forward, I'm kind of dead man walking in some ways, meaning like that I'm feeling like I'm kind of dead inside, but if I keep walking forward, I try and get good sleep, I exercise, I eat well, that can go a long way in beginning to interrupt that depressive loop. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie now for a little bit more about Families for Depression Awareness. I just want to thank you all so much. This has been absolutely my pleasure, and I hope this was supportive in some way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goldstein. I think there was a wealth of information in everything that you covered. Those exercises were excellent, hopefully for the viewing and listening audience, but also for me. Good reminders for me, too, for all of us who work in helping professions to remember that we have to take care of ourselves, that we need to commit to these changes, and that we can try many different forms of caring for ourselves that can make our lives and the lives of those around us better. So I'm going to go over some information about Families for Depression Awareness. Please don't go anywhere. Dr. Goldstein is going to be answering your questions. We see that a couple have already been submitted, so keep them coming. I'm just going to go through this. I'm going to try to do it in 2 to 3 minutes so we can have time for a few questions for Dr. Goldstein. So go ahead and submit those as I talk about Families for Depression Awareness. So our mission is to help families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. We are a national nonprofit organization, and we try to provide education, training, and support to family caregivers. Our philosophy is that depression and bipolar disorder affect the whole family. So by helping the caregiver, we are going to be helping the children, maybe helping the spouse, the grandparents. All of those people are affected by depression and bipolar disorder. Therefore, they all need support, and that's what we're here for. The repository for most of our resources are on our website, which is familyaware.org. There you will find a lot of wonderful resources such as personal stories, family stories and interviews, expert profiles. We also have information about free webinars like the ones you're listening to right now. We have one on bipolar disorder in adults coming up next month, so if you are interested in that, please sign up. We also have many of these webinars on archive, so you can access those as well. We have a wonderful new toolkit on cognitive symptoms of depression. It's called More Than Mood, and you can read all about that. We also offer web tools that have been mentioned some throughout the presentation. We have, of course, the Depression and Bipolar Test, which is just based on the PHQ-9. We have Mental Health Family Tree and other web tools there. We also have information about our other programs, such as our Teen Depression program, and there are ways to get resources around that and be engaged. You can access our publications and guides, and as you can see, that Coping with Stress brochure is what you will receive if you fill out the evaluation following this webinar. We also have a wonderful online blog called Care for Your Mind. It's an advocacy blog where we deal with issues of mental health care access. So if that is of interest to you, you can go to careforyourmind.org. We want to give special thanks to our presenter, Dr. Goldstein. He actually only has a few minutes for questions and answers, so we're going to let him get right to it. But before we do, I just want to thank the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Allergan Foundation, and Takeda and Lundbeck Alliance for their financial support. And of course, people just like you, if this webinar meant something to you, if it was important, if you got something out of it, please make a tax-deductible donation to Families for Depression Awareness. I think I did it in 2 minutes. So let's go right to question and answer, Dr. Goldstein. As I mentioned before, we have some people who are listening who are in helping professions. We have one young graduate student who says that she's in a mental health counseling program and that she has her own stress and is anticipating that she will have additional stress as she graduates through that program and starts working with people. So do you have any specific advice for people in helping professions on how they can manage stress or what they need to be looking out for?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, caregivers and people in the helping professions are sometimes the worst at taking care of themselves. Not saying the person who asked this question is, but we're in dire need of self-compassion, meaning like this recognition that, like, geez, this is hard what I'm doing. It's hard to take on, you know, a lot of, there's a couple things. It's hard to, you know, kind of take on people's, you know, experiences and be there with them and be really supportive and caring. And over time, I think that takes a toll. And we need to recognize our own moments of difficulty in the moment and have and build a strength and have an inclination to want to support ourselves. So knowing when we need to take breaks, and knowing when we need to play, and making sure we integrate that into our lives is essential. So if I had to say two things that or three things I would love someone to focus on who's in the healthcare profession or helping professions is mindfulness, so being able to hold someone's experience with a sense of balance, maybe not taking it on. You know, it's that experience of the person having experience as if it was your own experience, but the as if part is really important, so you're not kind of taking that home. And then the self-compassion, recognizing when you're having a difficult moment with the inclination to want to support ourselves. I talk a lot about this in Uncovering Happiness, by the way. And then also play. Play is such a stress reliever. And just uncovering for you what play means to you in your life and giving yourself permission to do that and recognizing it as you're doing that. So making sure you're just kind of really, and all that stuff doesn't need to take a ton of time. But making sure you're giving yourself those three things, I would say. And obviously that C thing is so important for all of helping with that. Sleep, exercise, and eating, you know, is also really important too.
We had a question that was submitted ahead of the webinar, and somebody was bringing up the fact that the holidays are coming around, and for various and sundry reasons, it's a stressful time. People like me make budgets every year about how much I'm going to spend, and then I never stick to it, and then I have the January regret of, oh my gosh, that's way too much money spent. We have people anticipating family get-togethers where there might be political or religious differences, and people feel stressed about those situations and stressed while they're in them. And we have people who get lonely around this time of year. Do you have any specific advice around holiday stress that people are anticipating?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I would just mention that holidays bring up times of grief for people too. Meaning like it's a time when people they've lost are no longer there. So I would say it's important to. I mentioned before that you can only prepare and respond. You can never control what happens in the moment. But now is a good time. We're in, early enough to kind of catch before the holidays, and so I would see if you can kind of set realistic expectations about what this holiday is going to be like for you, who's going to be there. I would visualize the scenarios that are going to happen and see how you want to relate to them. You might also get a glimpse of feelings that might arise, and if that's the case and you're feeling difficult feelings, that you notice are going to happen, then I would kind of make sure to come up with ways that are taking care of yourself. That's self-compassion. What are ways that I can do to take care of myself? Am I going to need to give myself breaks at times, away from people? Am I going to need to, make sure to not overdo it with the eating, or whatever? I want to make sure to sometimes, for people who aren't in the healthcare profession, sometimes giving, being altruistic, during that time, can get us out of our heads about this me, or I'm lonely, or, life, it's just not going to be that good, this or whatever. But giving, is its own kind of natural stress reliever and natural antidepressant. Unless you're already a caregiver, then I would say just delete that comment. You don't need to care for yourself more than for other people in that moment. I would even, if you wanted to, let others know if you feel others that you can trust that, this is typically a difficult time for you. And then you might get some social and emotional support from other people. So those are all kind of things. So set realistic expectations about what this is going to be like for you. If you visualize it and there's uncomfortable emotions, ask yourself how you can be caring for yourself. So you're planning, you're preparing. Know what your limits are. So if there's going to be things that are overwhelming for you, make sure, again, you're taking care of yourself or finding ways to do that, either going on a walk or lying down in another room, or if you're having you're going to have an emotional experience, you allow yourself to remove yourself and have a good cry or meltdown or whatever it might be in that moment. And then also the altruism piece, for those who are not caregivers, can be really effective for the holiday time.
Okay, great. And as we conclude, is there something that people can use as an affirmation or something positive that they can tell themselves, maybe in those first few moments of the day, as you were mentioning, setting up your day for more positive experiences, or something they can say at their desk at work when they're getting overwhelmed? Is there any helpful phrases or any kind of affirmations that you find work well that we can all take home with us tonight?
Well, I'm going to give you something different than that. I think the best thing you can do for yourself right now and throughout the day, today and tomorrow and the next day, is to come down from your mind and into your body a bit more. So rather than thinking certain thoughts to positive thoughts necessarily, the first step is really to come into your body, because when you're present with your body, that's inversely correlated with all the wondering and worrying and figuring out and trying to problem solve of the mind. That's oftentimes correlated with more rumination and worrying and things like that. So you come into your body multiple times a day and you ask yourself the question, am I bracing right now? Is my body tensing anywhere? And if it is, then your job is just to soften your body and take a deep breath. If you did that like 4 or 5 times a day over the next week, just be curious about what your experience is. You might find those natural affirmations that you're talking about come to you more naturally. Like, oh, life's going to be okay. Or I'm okay right now. You might recognize that in that particular moment you're actually safe. So I would do that more than the affirmation, because that's really the first step to me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Goldstein, again, for the presentation and for all your wonderful advice. For those of you who are still on the line, remember your next steps. Complete our online evaluation so you can receive the free Coping with Stress brochure. Implement these commitments that you have taken. If you've jotted something down, do it. Stick it on your refrigerator, stick it on your mirror. Remember what you've learned tonight and follow through, because you never know. Somebody from Families for Depression Awareness may call you and say, you promised to do this. Have you been taking care of yourself? We want to check in with you. If you believe you or someone that you know might be at risk for depression, take a depression test. You can use ours or any of the other approved screeners. And please visit our website to learn more about us and to see about other trainings and resources we have. This concludes our program. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.